Yeah, it did, Giga. It did seem very contrarian just by the title, but we'll see how this goes. So we're gonna add our own bits of reaction and opinions into this. So it should be pretty good. What's up, Fane and DZ? All right, here we go.
The Ratchet and Clank series now spans about a dozen games, so a question that gets brought up a lot is, which one's the best? Well, the critical and popular consensus leans towards the third title in the series, Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal, being the favorite, which has always struck me.
I wanna already address this. This is not me like criticizing anything. This is me just saying that within the speedrunning community, we are aware of the fact that Ouya was ranked the highest as far as like gaming critics and things like that. But none of us rank Ouya as the best casual game. None of us do that. Even myself, like, Ouya is my all-time favorite speed game, and I would not rank it as my favorite casual in the series. I already am very much aware of a lot of the flaws as far as casual gaming goes.
Is odd, because even as a child when I first played this game, I found it severely lacking in content and polish in comparison to the previous two titles. An opinion that...
And to give you guys an idea of just the time frame of how the developers made these games, so basically Ratchet 1 came out in 2002, and while they were making Ratchet 1, they were already working on Ratchet 2, which came out a year later in 2003. Then once they finished Ratchet 2, they churned out Ouya in 1 year. After that, so 2004 was when Ouya came out. So just so you guys are aware. What's going on, Nano, Jarnott, Halluch, Hawks Hall, anybody else I missed? Oh, hi.
Oh, thank you for subscribing.
Yo, Emery, thank you so much for the 4 months in a row. Sorry, guys, in YouTube, this is going to be a thing that happens. Thank you so much. Welcome back to the Rack Pack, Emery. It's a pleasure to have you back here. I'm really glad to see you back.
Doesn't really seem to be all that represented amongst the fans. Before I piss everyone off though, I'll say that I do enjoy Ratchet and Clank 3. It's a cool platformer shooter, and I was still entertained while playing through it again for this video. But I gotta speak my mind on this one, because the out of this world praise this game gets at times I think is unwarranted. Piss the new fans off now.
Nobody gives this the highest praise in the speedrunning community either. Like I said before, we're all very aware of its flaws.
I gotta go and annoy the old ones too, can't catch a break. I'll start with an aspect that disappointed me the most when I started playing when the game first came out. Just how much smaller and straightforward each level had become. In the original two games, it was rare to come across a level that didn't have at least 2 or 3 different routes to take at the start. I don't think I need to make much of an argument for why this was fun. Arrive on a new planet, pick a direction, and see what you come across. In Ratchet 3, the amount of paths in a level was usually reduced to 1. Just take a look. Here's every stage from the original trilogy. A pretty even level set, right? Now let's add on there how many paths each level has. This is the maximum number of paths in a level you can conceivably pick between starting at a single time during one visit. Add them all.
This is something I am also aware of. Ratchet 3 was very linear. I will address this, but I am 100% aware of the fact that it is pretty linear as far as the game itself goes. I don't think that's a problem, and I will explain why later. It's more so not as far as... It's not an issue, in my opinion. Oh, hi.
Oh, thank you.
Oh my god.
For subscribing.
The fucking double sub. Fane and Monroe Show, thank you both for the 2 months in a row. It's great to have you back. Both of you.
Oh, thank you for subscribing.
Yeah, like I said, thank you both. So, like I was saying, linearity... Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't necessarily think a game being linear is a problem. To many people, that is completely contrary to what a lot of people believe. I've never been an open world kind of guy anyway, but again, like I said, I'm going to get into this later.
All up, and whoa, look at that. Ratchet 3 has about half as many paths to take as Ratchet 1. Ratchet 2 has a few less, but that's omitting the space combat levels as well. Now,
which are garbage.
I disagree with how I've decided to count these. There's probably some room for error, and a discussion could be had on what constitutes a quote-unquote path here. This is just how I've enumerated each level. But you may have a slightly different count, which is fine, but I think any difference from an alternate count would be pretty minor. Though regardless of that, you may be thinking, hey, a planet in Ratchet 1 like Hoven may have 3 different paths to take, but planets in 3 like Marcadia simply stack content in a linear succession. With an adventure shoot-em-up path, a combat area segment, and a puzzle sort of section, you just have to do them one after the other. In fact, a lot of levels include some combat area horde mode kind of bonus stages at some point in them, so there's content here, right? You just have to do it in a sequential order. But aside from the fact that I do want to argue that there's a benefit to letting the player pick which segment to do first to allow for more freedom and give the world a more sprawling, mysterious layout, there's also the fact that the way Ratchet 3 pads its levels is scattershot and cheap. Those extra battle arena sections I mentioned before are actually just multiplayer maps lifted from the new competitive online mode Ratchet 3 added. Levels like Tyrannosis and Metropolis, which would have one objective otherwise, include these extra lazy aforementioned horde mode bonus areas.
Okay, so I already want to address this because this is the idea of calling this lazy is very misleading. So let me explain, again, going back to what I said earlier, Ratchet 3 was made in 1 year. And you have to keep in mind that back when this was happening, multiplayer was not an advanced concept yet. We're thinking, what do we always think of when we think games that are known for heralding multiplayer into the, like, propelling it into the modern era? We think like shooters, we think Call of Duty, we think Halo, we think a lot of these games that started as basically just taking maps and kind of just throwing people onto them. And so that's basically Ouya. I think what a lot of people don't give enough credit to Ouya for was the fact that it was the first in the series to really venture towards multiplayer. And realistically, when you figure they only had a year to make this game, and that's, again, this is me not making excuses on behalf of the developers, but more so me trying to justify the choices that they made in the game. It makes sense that if they're taking all this time to create a multiplayer component, which, believe it or not, people still do play to this day. Not very many people. I think I talked to one of the people who's still in the community by the name of Aiming, and he told me that there's like 40 dedicated people who still play, which is kind of funny, but it still is alive. And they were able to churn out this multiplayer experience in 1 year at a time where, you know, multiplayer was, hey, I have this Ethernet cable that I'm going to hook up to my PS2 now, and we're just going to see what the fuck happens, you know? And I don't think it's a problem that they borrowed a lot of the multiplayer maps, and in fact, I think that's actually a very clever thing to do because it gives you a sense of familiarity when you're jumping into the multiplayer. When you head into the multiplayer, you're like, oh, wait a minute, okay, I don't know all these maps, but I know Marcadia, I know Metropolis, I know Blackwater, I know Iridia, I know all these places. And honestly, like, that's a good stepping stone because I can figure this out, I can learn some things about this, and then I can transition into all these other ones. So in fact, this horde mode type battle that we have, while I do think that it is too predominant in Ouya, I also think that it's very smart in so much that it fits the general schematic of what they were going for, of experimentation and trying new things. So that's personally what I believe as far as the multiplayer goes. I'm just going to read a few of these comments that you guys are typing so that I can keep up with chat as well. I think the inclusion of multiplayer was weird since back then probably not a lot of people had a setup to play PS2 online. I agree. Again, that's why I'm saying this was an era of experimentation. Now, if you notice, a lot of the differences between Ratchet 1 and Ratchet 2 come from... I'm sorry, not Ratchet 1 and Ratchet 2. Ratchet 2 and Ratchet 3 come from very specific changes. They removed the linearity. They removed a lot of the sub-characters, but instead they honed in on specific things. And again, I'm going to get into a lot of these later.
Where you're put in a multiplayer map and usually just forced to fight some spawning enemies. In fact, 2 of the main levels are just multiplayer maps. the returning planet from Ratchet 1, Rilgar and Iridia. When a character
Again, I don't think that's a problem.
mentioned to me that I would get to return to Blackwater City, planet Rilgar, one of the most iconic levels from the first game, I jumped for joy, only to drop in and discover I was on a tiny little island and all I would be doing is shooting some common monsters. Planet Dax is the only planet in the game that in concept feels somewhat like it was laid out like a classic Ratchet level, with 3 different paths from the outset. Some levels mix things up like Tyrannosis, which has you going towards one objective but requires a bunch of turrets and an open map to be taken down, and I'll give them credit for trying something new and mixing things up like this. But now what am I doing in Ratchet and Clank? Not exploring alien worlds, but hurtling towards a waypoint marker? In past games, branching paths wouldn't just lead you to the same objective on one world, they might send you on a hunt for something else on a completely different level, making the game branch out even more. Ratchet 2 introduced the Gladiator Arenas, which were locations you could fight for cash-in under different rules. There were 2 of them located in already completed levels. For example, the Maktar space station had an action-like path, a puzzle-em-up path, a rocket that took you to a spherical platforming moon, and it had its arena. Ratchet 3 siphons its arena off to its own level you have to fly to. And while this version has some obstacle course challenges, I can't help but feel shortchanged, especially when the arena is now one of the only extracurricular activities to return from past entries. Ratchet 2 took the space combat segments from Ratchet 1 and made them their own dogfighting levels, with multiple locations and challenges to complete. The first 2 games also had 2 racetracks, which keep in mind could be found in their own already completed platforming levels. There was no like racetrack space station or whatever. Ratchet 3 has neither space combat or racing, instead multiplayer maps recycled into even more arena-style horde modes, which are already kind of covered by the actual arenas. Shockingly, not even grind rails made it into this game. Yeah, weird, right? Where were they? Another fun bit of diversity, the occasional level in previous outings would chuck in the iconic Ratchet grind boot segment, but here, gone completely. 3 does have its own fun, unique shake-ups like the Mega Man style Quark vidcomic levels, but no races, no space combat, no grind boot segments, less paths in a level, and extra objectives and entire stages retooled out of multiplayer maps. The open area scavenger hunt mission from 2 is back in the form of the Aquatos sewers, but let's not forget 2 actually had 2 of those. The comparisons to past games are not favourable, even levels that had only one path in say Ratchet 1 like Umbris and Quark's space station that culminated in a boss fight had a lot of meat to them. Ratchet 3 has single path levels that culminate in a boss fight, but unlike Ratchet 1 that always had these epic obstacle courses, a beastly challenge. Here we get Courtney Gear's boss stage where it's like a straight line that takes about a minute to run through. I hesitate to even call this a full Ratchet level. When you compare this tube-like level to another similar looking one like Drex Fleet in 1, which included a swimming race and space combat level on top of the main path when it really could have gotten away with not doing all that stuff, the comparison isn't in 3's favor. Even when
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. There is a lot. And again, this is one of those things where it's built, yes, his arguments are built on facts, but at the same time, I think they're deceptive in nature. Now, basically what he's doing is he's kind of pulling a bait and switch. He's kind of saying, oh, well, this had this, then this, and this. And I mean, Ouya had like this and this, but like, that's not really a big, it's like, well, no, you can't just say, no, like, the vid comics were a very integral part of this. And in fact, I think that was one of the nicest changes of pace that they had.
Oh, thank you for subscribing.
Yo, Richu, thank you for 9 months. I do like tuna. I'm glad that you like tuna as well. I think it's deceptive to say that the vid comics don't matter and like the Magna Boot sections. Because, okay, so here's the thing. Okay, again, let me unpack a lot of this one at a time. It's easy to say that it was dumb to have one planet dedicated to gladiator battles, but I kind of liked that. I mean, having them divided across 2 planets, kind of, it's like, it's trying to trick you into thinking there's more than there actually is. I'm sure if you compare mission for mission, all the stuff that happens between combined Joba and what's the other one? It was Joba and Maktar, and all that's on Annihilation Nation. I think Annihilation Nation actually has more to it, and a lot of it is because of the platforming challenges that they added into it. So really, I don't mind the fact that they only have it centralized on one planet. I think it's actually nice to be able to categorize that and say, okay, well, I want to go fight some arena fights. I'll go to Annihilation Nation. All right, I'm kind of bored of this right now. I'll leave Annihilation Nation. I'll go somewhere else. Again, like, this is all a matter of opinion. I don't think that's a problem. I can see why people do think that's a problem, because it kind of removes a little bit of the exploration. It kind of removes a little bit of the feel. Like, it's like a nice... People, when they play games casually, they kind of like this artificial sense of discovery. Or rather, they'll take... It doesn't have to just be a natural sense of discovery. It can also be an artificial one. If you hide away, if you find one... If you have like one gladiator arena and you like, you know, you hide it in a planet and you let a player discover it and you're like, oh my god, this is really cool. And then you kind of take it and break it in half and hide it in two more obvious places. People still kind of feel that same sense of reward that triggers in their brain when they're like, oh, there's this one, and there's this one? Oh my god, I fucking loved this one. That means we get another one, when in reality, there weren't really that many missions in both of them.
Oh, thank you for subscribing.
Yo, Scribe, thank you so much. I appreciate the 2 months in a row, dude. Welcome back to the Rack Bag. What's up, Ruffle? Annihilation Nation. Oh my god.
Oh, thank you for subscribing.
Yo, Raffle Mouse, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub, my dude. I really appreciate that. Welcome to the Rack Pack. I think you've subbed in the past. I forget, though, to be honest. So you have to remind me. Not a big fan of Rilgar just being missions. Oh, I agree, 100%. But I think nobody's really arguing that Rilgar is the weakest section in the entirety of Ratchet and Clank, as well as the missions in Marcadia, which, you know, it's like, they tried something new and it didn't work out. And I'm not excusing them for it. I don't think that that's a thing that, like, I can be like, oh, well, like, that doesn't matter. Because it does matter. It was an integral part of the experience, and I agree with that. As for my question, what did you ask, Nano? I completely missed it in my rambling. Hold on, I gotta fart. Oh, yeah, that felt good. How was cow decap? Oh, you're talking a tab. Scroll up. Let me see. I'm trying to scroll up, but it's hard to leaf through this. What the fuck? Wait, where's the question? If you're still going with this in like 30 to 40 minutes, we're gonna jump into VC and discuss the vid. Oh, I'd be down with that. I would be down with that. Okay, anyway, let's continue on. People are telling me to continue watching this, so let's continue watching this.
Say a level like the Holostar Studios decides to include an extra hidden path for a gold bolt, it feels clunky and rushed, short. And its unique kind of set-piece events are like, what am I even looking at here? Ratchet 3 does include one cool addition from Ratchet 2, the Insomniac Museum, where you get to roam around the dev's office and see things they cut from the game.
Oh wait, hold on, before I can... Actually, I'm sorry, there was one thing I wanted to touch on. Oh, I'll touch on Aquados in a little bit. Actually, I don't know if he's going to continue talking about Aquados. It's my stern opinion that Aquados is the Aquados sewers are everything that Tabora and Grelbin wishes they were. Just because it was open world doesn't mean it was good. In fact, I remember absolutely loathing farming crystals and moonstones in Ratchet 2. I thought that was actually incredibly tedious and painful. I love the idea of having the Aquados sewers where it's all centralized in this one gigantic labyrinth. I think that's so cool. But yeah, anyway, we're continuing on.
Now their explanations lack voiceover, unlike 2.
I like anime and shiny objects.
Another thing I guess they ran out of time to include. But in here, next to discarded tanks and enemies and even full Quark vidcomic levels, which granted are really cool to get to play as a bonus, there's also a racetrack. An unfinished racetrack clearly meant to be set in the Florana level. And this is just the ultimate indication to me of just how unfinished Ratchet 3 is. They started modeling and mapping out this track, but they just didn't get time to finish, and that's kind of the crux of the issue, isn't it? How much time did they get? Well, only a year, which isn't a lot and I feel for them. Just this, what was completed, must have been a nightmare to put together. But Ratchet 2 also only had a year, and that had way more stuff in it, so what could have been the misstep compared to that? Well, there is the new online multiplayer Sony requested to be put in the game, which granted probably took some time to make, and its development must have affected the single player if they had to pad out the game with its maps. Yeah, it's possible the multiplayer didn't force them to compromise on the single player and this was all part of the plan, but you know, I'd really rather give them this out than consider that. I guess as a player, you have to ask yourself if you're the kind of person who enjoys this granted, pretty fun and fleshed out online mode enough to put up with a gimped single player campaign to have it. And who knows, maybe you are cool with that, but for me, who didn't even have an online enabled PS2, I felt shortchanged. Unfortunately, even for what the single player does manage to include, Ratchet 3 still lacks a layer of polish its jam-packed predecessors presented. Ratchet 1 feels like the biggest seller of the trilogy in terms of style. As Insomniac's first PS2 title, it was obviously attempting to showcase the power of the new machine and the crazy new stuff they could make. Levels had loads of details, and some of them had really considered shadows and colors and visual effects that added to the mood of each world. Ratchet 2 also had a lot of neat looking environments. Ratchet 3 by comparison looks drab, colors are lifeless, and there's no serious attempts at mood lighting or anything. I don't think 2 is entirely on par with 1 visually either, but 3 is just, geez. Look at the Holostar Studios level. I get that parts are supposed to be tacky to satirize cheesy film sets, but that doesn't excuse the look of the level being so unsightly, plain and bland, and yet kinda garish in its color choices. All I really need to do to prove my point is show you the Metropolis level. A returning level which, on top of in 1 having way more content than in 3, lacks the finer detail and vibrance of the original. If this was the original Metropolis level from 1, no obstacle course, no characters, no train station, no way it would have been memorable enough to warrant the retread it got here. Comparing Ratchet 3 to some of its other contemporaries isn't favourable either. Naughty Dog were known for working in parallel with Insomniac on their own platformer series, Jak and Daxter. The two even were known to help each other out on occasion. Jak 2 released just before Ratchet 2, and a year later there's still a world of difference between the polish present in that game and Ratchet 2's successor. Animations in Jak 2 are great. This is the sequel that added firearms to Jak's moveset, and every jump, roll, and spin cycles seamlessly into getting out a gun, firing off shots, and going to town. If his gun is out, he'll ram enemies with it when punching instead of using his fist. Jak will spread his legs and hold himself in a different way depending on the gun he's using. Use the shotgun, and occasionally he'll even transition into this gangster single-handed sideways aim, and it's just sick as hell. When he slows down, he does this little trot on the spot. It's so cool and detailed. He feels alive. In Ratchet 3, Ratchet just kind of stands there like, just kind of shoots away. Maybe Clank scratches his head or something. Get in a vehicle in Jak 2 and you see Jak physically get in it, like an animation plays where he jumps in. It all flows. Ratchet 3, poof. He's in the car. This next thing is a pretty petty aesthetical complaint.
That's a very specific complaint. And again, I don't see the issue with the complaint, but I also don't really understand why it's there. He's kind of saying he kind of pulls away focus here. He kind of said for a long time, all right, well, Ratchet 3 doesn't have these things that Ratchet 1 and 2 had. And then he just completely pivots into, oh yeah, also Ratchet 3 didn't have these things that Jak and Daxter didn't have. And it's like, well, fucking duh. The Ratchet games never had that stuff. Like, that's not a real complaint. That's like a bait and switch. That's like what you try to say. Like, you point out a small nuance of something and get people to be like, oh my god, yeah, I never realized that. Which completely distracts them from the idea that it had nothing to do with this point. Yeah, I do understand that 3... Like, I'm not arguing about the color palette. I think most people I've talked to, we're all in agreement that that Ratchet 3 had the most lacking color palette of any of the OG trilogy. I mean, Ratchet 1 experimented a ton in very earthy tones, lots of grays, greens, browns, dark oranges, and even some vibrant blues and some green, some light greens, and like basically, a whole bunch of earthy tones that really helped everything pop. And like I guess like with Ratchet 2 as well, like it had varying shades of blue everywhere, and it was a very warm aesthetic. And Ratchet 3 kind of had this like piss yellow and like dull orange, and I totally get that. I'm not arguing with that at all. I think that there's this attempt to actually, no, I shouldn't say what he's trying to do. I want to watch a little bit more and see if he's going to go to the positives of Ouya, because right now all he's doing is pointing out all the things that are wrong with it and not touching on any of the huge advances that this made in this series, as far as like, you know, the weapons, the upgrade system, the nanotech system, the movement, the charge boots, the hyper shot adding a depth of like dimension. Not really adding anything, because it was, yeah, I mean, all the other games had like their own version of the hyper shot as well, so that's a moot point. But the feel of the game is what really drove it home. It was so polished in comparison to 2 and 1. Like 1, the tank style for many players feels very clunky, and 2 is very stiff, and 3 they finally hit the sweet spot in 3, where it was like all the movement finally came together. The double jump height was amazing. If you guys have never noticed this, before, the double jump height in Ratchet 1 is pathetic. The double jump height in 2 is pathetic if you're wearing the Hella pack, and is actually really good if you're wearing the Thruster pack. And then they just homogenized the double jump height, because why the fuck should that matter? They made the double jump smoother. They made the overall movement with both packs smoother. And it's like, I don't know, there's a lot of it just feels better. The gun, it is more combat oriented. And I think that was to homogenize it towards the idea of, hey guys, Sony made us put a multiplayer in here, so we're going to make the conceit of this game combat based, so that you're ready to do the multiplayer when you're thrown into it. So I'm curious to see if he touches on any of these. I would like it if he did. I don't disagree with the things that he's saying. Like, I think that there is a lot to be desired from this game, but I think the one thing he's completely left out is what made it so special in the first place, in that it just feels fucking fantastic. This game plays like a dream. So let's continue on.
But the HUD, the orange, it doesn't look great.
Yeah.
The best HUD was clearly the one from the first game. The menus had this old fuzzy CRT look to them that kept in line with the ragtag working class mechanic aesthetic of the game. 2 unfortunately ditched that detail, but at least went for a kind of cool, pleasing blue HUD. Ratchet 3 is just...
Oh, thank you for subscribing.
Yo, Beastlets, thank you so much for the 2 months in a row, my guy. Really appreciate that. Welcome back to the Rack Back, dude. It's great to have you back.
Ooh, it looks kinda cheap. Enemy variety is in decline from past games too. The originals had a few factions who'd show up consistently throughout the game, but each world usually also had some one-off foes specific to that location. Because, you know, galaxies is like a lot of space between worlds. There are some examples of this in 3. Quark's hideout has his henchmen, the arenas have gladiators, but you're gonna be seeing the same robot dudes and aliens in a lot of places. Speaking of enemies, what is with some of these guys? Enemies seem to scale way higher in this game due to the added leveling up mechanics guns have. They can now level up 4 times on your first playthrough, but some of the enemies, no matter what you do, just don't seem to care if you're shooting them with certain weapons. Look, here's me firing a fully upgraded starting gun in the second game against a soldier in the final level. You see, he staggers a bit, right? He doesn't like that. Here's me doing the same in Ratchet 3 halfway through the game. They just do not care. And if they're in the air, even rockets are just kind of shrugged off. Enemies not react.
He picked the worst weapon in the game to showcase this point. The M90 Hurricane is the worst weapon in the game. It's the worst one. Except, like, I guess the Hollow Shield Glove is worse in a combat perspective. But, like, yeah, like, of fucking course you're not gonna do damage with the worst weapon in the game. There's fucking terrible weapons in Ratchet 2. What the fuck is the Clank Zapper doing? That shit cost 1,000,000 bolts. Like, what the fuck? Like, goddamn, dude. Like, and then in this example, wait, hold on.
upgraded starting gun in the second game against a soldier in the final level. You see, he staggers a bit, right? He doesn't like that. Here's me doing the same in Ratchet 3 halfway through the game. They just do not care. And if they're in the air,
He's shooting a V2 fucking Annihilator! Like, I don't know, dude. It's one of those things where it's like, this is so cherry-picked, and like, I totally get why he's saying this. And it's like, the Lancer's the first one, and the third is one of the best too. It's a shitty comparison. It is a shitty comparison. Well, in 2, the Lancer is actually good. In 3, the N90 Hurricane fucking sucked dick. And it's like, but that's a common theme in these games, is that some weapons suck and some weapons are amazing. And it's like, yeah, they do have, yes, the enemies in Ouya have damage thresholds for being staggered. That is a thing that they added. And it's like, they even said in the menu, like if you go to the weapons menu, they say how much power each weapon has, and like obviously the numbers don't really mean a whole lot, but it's like you can kind of gather if one of them has a power of 20,000, one of them has one of 500. Well, fucking yeah, this one's gonna do more damage. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. There was another thing I wanted to touch on. I forget what he said. Oh, the enemy diversity. I love how he was like, oh, well, like, these planets have this one, and this one has this one, but no, there's no actual diversity. And, like, I get his main point. I get his point that these guys, the fucking laser dudes, the 3 eyes, the ankle biters, they all show up too much. But that was also, again, part of the plot. Like, the plot, the A plot of this whole thing was supposed, well, rather, the A plot is Dr. Nefarious. The B plot is that there's a galactic war going on. So, like, of course, like, all this is going to happen because that was the way the game was designed. And it's like, I don't think it's fair to say it's an issue of game design. I think it's much fairer to say, I don't like this plot. I think that's a much better way of putting it. And, yeah, and then even the traffic cone is right. The plot's, like, they fucking have, like, a fucking orgiastic sex baby, and then all the fucking Tyrannoids get turned into robots.
Oh, thank you for subscribing.
Yo, Adam, thank you so much for 10 months in a row, dude. Welcome back to the Rack Pack. It's great to have you here, man. And the Enemy University developer said that it was to save time. Yeah, and I get that. Again, I'm saying that, like, it's not a bad thing to say that, like, it's not a bad thing to say, like, oh, I didn't like the plot of 2. I didn't like the plot of 3. I thought the plot of 2 was kind of stupid, or at least it didn't resolve. Like, the plot was there. It was just the way it resolved was kind of anticlimactic. I mean, the Protopet fight was dumb. Like, it was a terrible final boss fight. And then, like, you kind of get blue ball. I mean, like, you get blue ball with the whole Angela shit. Wait, was it Angela? No, yeah, it was Angela in 2 and Sasha in 3. I don't know, it was just like, it feels like a lot of these are very cherry-picked. And I agree with a lot of the things he's saying. Like I said, it's not as if I'm saying that Rack 3, oh, no, guys, don't get me wrong. Rack 3 had so much diversity, it had all these secrets, like, you guys are just missing a whole big chunk of it. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, however, is that, like, I think he's kind of aggrandizing the problems to be more than they're meant to be analyzed. It's like, I don't know. Let's continue on. I've kind of said all I can say.
In a lot of places. Speaking of enemies, what is with some of these guys? Enemies seem to scale way higher in this game due to the fact that the enemies, no matter what you upgrade, he doesn't like that. And if they're in the air, even rockets are just kind of shrugged off.
And it's just because this game was meant to be harder as well. Like, that's another big point of it.
Reacting to the powerful weapons of destructions at the baddies. This is also the game that really started dialing back on the one-off encounters with characters on each level. This left a lot of locations feeling barren and uninhabited. Not as many quirky characters to just run into. In 1 and 2, every level also had a funny little preview movie, and while 3 starts out doing these, at some point it just kind of forgets about them. Screw it, here's the coordinates. Like, I guess what could you write in a preview video about some of these single-path obstacle course worlds? And speaking of the writing, while Ratchet and Clank 3 can be a hilarious game at times, I wish I could also say that it still continues the poignant satire and consistent theming that the previous two games had. While it definitely has some funny satire in it, it's way more scattershot and unlike past games feels like a bit of a mess. The previous two games had a heavy satirical through line with its poking fun of consumerism. The first game about a self-absorbed populace being taken advantage of by an evil businessman vying for money, and the second one about the dealings of one of these futuristic companies, one that you worked for and in fact sponsored your activities for most of the game, the conflicts it caused and the way ravenous consumerism itself could be used as a weapon. The third game starts by introducing us to Clank's new job as an action movie hero. Which is fun. Something the original Ratchet games always played around with was the celebrity status our heroes gain after each title and what jokes can be made out of that. Once the heroes are called into action by the threat of a new villain though, they soon have to track down washed up superhero Captain Quark to find clues to defeat the new foe.
Impossible, you say? Perhaps for a lesser strategist?
And the game eventually meanders into this sort of jokey war piece where Quark becomes the leader of the army that faces the enemy, takes credit for Ratchet's work, and boosts his own fragile ego. For a minute there you think,
again, before I forget anything, I want to unpack some of this stuff as well. So the first point he made, let me leaf through the thumbnail or the tracker here. Oh, the one-off characters. Yeah, again, I totally get why people would feel as if the world were a little bit more barren because of it lacks a lot of the kookier characters and things like that. And that's fine. Like, again, I totally understand that. Me personally, the way I'm thinking about this is that yeah, I mean, I think they sacrificed a lot of the side characters for developing more on the main characters. I mean, there's a lot more screen time given to Quark, given to, you know, the Q Force or whatever the hell they call it in this game. I don't even fucking remember. I don't know. There's a lot of emphasis around building up a lot of the more main characters, and by proxy, I think that establishes a lot of these characters as powerhouses throughout the rest of the series. I mean, Nefarious is... I mean, I know a lot of people tend to rank Drek as a better villain in general than Nefarious, but I mean, Nefarious became iconic through 3, and he became a staple in the entire Future Trilogy off the back of this game, giving him enough screen time to really, you know, get there. I'm going to be putting all this on YouTube, 8 again. Rack 3 focuses more on Ranger missions. Hold on. More serious actual job in Rack 1 where Ratchet has to make his way through space no matter how, as long as he stops Drek. Yes, I'm not going to argue that the plot... I honestly think the strongest plot is easily Ratchet 1. I think that there was more character... like, exclusively on Ratchet and Clank, their relationship was much more thorough in Ratchet 1 than in any other game, where they start off fucking like hating each other because of all the shit that went down in Umbris, and then they have to spend the entire rest of the game patching their relationship and their friendship. You meet Clank's mom fucking all the way at the end on Quartu, and there's that real tearjerker moment of like when Clank is like, he finds his mom, he's like, I hope I make you proud, and they leave, and then like shit, it's fucking typing on the screen, you already have, and I'm like, oh my fucking god. It's like, that's amazing. There's so much payoff in Ratchet 1, and I think that none of the other games have really tapped into that pure, unadulterated sense of reward that comes out of these very small things. In fact, I think that a lot of the other games rely on these extravagant plot points, which kind of throw you more into a sense of drama, but don't necessarily give you that same sense of payoff. But I think that saying that Ratchet 3 is lacking because of the side characters, I don't know. Like, as a kid, I never heard anybody mention, like, oh, you know what really makes these games for me? The side characters. Like, I think that people were like, oh yeah, dude, the fucking plumber is sick, and like, Al's alright, I guess, but like, you know, Helga is like fucking thick as hell, or like whatever the fuck people say. I think that's, I don't know, all the people, they make reoccurrences, all the major players, and they give them a lot more time to like really become actual true-to-life characters. So I don't think that's an issue. I think that's just a stylistic difference. And I don't think that's a valid criticism personally. So let me go through the rest of this. Oh, the consumerism thing? What? I mean, maybe Ratchet 1 and Ratchet 2 is supposed to be like satire, like a dig at the consumerist market. I never really got that. I mean, like, I feel like that's a little bit tinfoil hat to say that. I don't know. I feel like that's I don't know, dude. That's just like, I mean, I never thought about that. And that is a very valid thing, I guess. It, like, if we're looking at it in a very reductionist sense, but I don't think that was their main ploy, was to be like, oh, you know who really sucks? You know what really sucks? Like, consumerism. Like, we should really hit them hard, let people know what the fuck is up. You know, like, I don't think that was their intention. I just thought they were probably like, yeah, this is like a cool thing we can just like, I mean, it just makes for a cool plot point. For me, these side characters are so memorable and cool. I mean, and I think a lot of them were in Ouya. I mean, you had the plumber, you had Al, you had Helga, you had Quark, you had, like, all these people. You had fucking Lawrence, you know? Like, everything costs money. Well, I mean, I think that was more just a game design choice, where they wanted you to have to explore the places. Like, you had to farm bolts via exploring the world so that you could afford the infobots to other planets. Like, I've talked to Mike Stout about this, and he was just like, well, yeah, we just kind of wanted to, like, we removed that element in Ouya because it felt really tedious and stupid, you know? Like, people didn't want to have to pay to go to planets anymore. They wanted to pay to buy their weapons, and I totally agree with that. Now even the computers are charging us. That is funny. Like, I'm not saying they don't do it in a smart way. Like, they definitely write it very well. I don't know. I think, like, honestly, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing either way. I think it's just a choice. You know, and if you liked it, you liked it. If you didn't, then, like, you know, whatever. We had the best side characters by far. They had a few side characters with a lot of personality. Yeah, and I think that was the trade-off. Instead of having, like, random fucking Gadgetron muscular dude who sends you to fight the Thugs for Less dude on, fucking Dabo orbit or whatever, you had, like, you know, you had, like, people getting real screen time. I don't know. Yeah, 40k on Smol was fucking dumb. Yeah, and that's another thing, Jarnott. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't think it's a bad thing that they removed the grind boots. I kind of wish that they had explored more options as far as, like, something new they could have done. Like, maybe gravity boots that, like, shift gravity up and down, or, like, something like that like, kind of gives you a means to make more, like, interesting puzzles.
Thank you for subscribing.
Thank you so much for 9 months in a row, Hitman. Number 9 loves. See you next month. Also say hi, Melissa. Hi, Melissa. Hope you're doing well tonight. Yeah, I wish they had replaced them with something. But I totally get why they thought that it wasn't necessary. I mean, like, people did, like, miss that fun, like, side quest thingy. And, you know, I do give them credit for acknowledging that, because that's something that a lot of people don't think about. But, you know, it's like, when you're making music, right? Because I'm a musician, so the way I'm thinking about this is like music. You don't just add shit just to add it. You add it if it actually, you know, furthers the idea of the game. And if they felt that they couldn't do anything new with it, then it's like, I'm totally fine with them scrapping it, because it would have felt like more rehashed otherwise. Yo, Painter, thank you for the 100 bits. I appreciate that. So let's continue on. Oh wait, no wait. Was there anything else I want to touch on? Yeah, I don't get why he's knocking having Sasha and, like, finding Quark, because, like, this was just, like, it was a new venture into a different kind of plot. Like, again, my main point here that I want to keep saying over and over, because I don't want people to, like, extrapolate shit that I'm saying that this was different. And change upsets people sometimes, but change isn't inherently a bad thing.
Thanks.
Yo, thank you, Gabe, for the 5 bits.
Maybe the game this time is going to build up to some unified theme about poking fun at fame and the status people have as celebrities. But then the villain's scheme takes center stage, and it turns out his goal is to enact a massive genocide because he's super racist and wants all non-robots wiped out.
Too long
have we robots suffered under the bigotry, the stupidity, the squishiness and foul stench of organic life form?
Okay, actually, yeah, I did think of one more thing I wanted to talk about. When he said that they started off having those satirical little, like, planet intros and things like that, and then eventually it kind of funneled into just being like, alright, you gotta go here next, you gotta go here next, or else everyone's gonna die. I thought that kind of raised the stakes, personally. I kind of like that. I think, I don't know. It's like, it's one of those things where I felt like a dire sense of urgency. It was kind of like at the end of Ratchet 1, where everything was leading up to the final battle. It felt like, you know, oh, thank you for the 5 bits, convey. It felt like, I don't know, like, it felt like shit got a lot darker. The Phoenix gets attacked, like, fucking, you have to go find Quark, who just fucking went AWOL for no real reason. And then, like, you have to go wipe out this machine that's going to destroy all organic life. I mean, it's definitely a much darker direction that the series went to, but I don't think it's uninspired. I think that certainly it's a little bit lacking as far as, like, motive, but it makes sense if you've been following the plot of the movie. Yeah, I agree. The Phoenix being attacked was actually really fucking hype. It was such a cool part of the game because you really felt the stakes. Where it was like, yeah, if I don't save everybody, all these robots are gonna just shoot my friends in the head and kill them. Is this guy touching on the lore of Ratchet being disappointing or gameplay-wise? I think he's mostly touching on the lore and the design choices. He hasn't even talked about the gameplay or the music, which also wasn't bad at all. Thank you, Hitman, for the 10 bits. Like what was I saying? The music. Like, I don't think the music in 3 was as strong as 2, but I thought it was really fucking good. And it was, I mean, I think it's good across all 3 games. I think if there's one thing that Insomniac consistently does well, it's making really amazing OSTs. So, I don't know, like, I feel, you know, a lot of this is cherry-picked, and that's kind of the point of these kinds of videos. I agree with some of the points, but I don't necessarily think that they're deal breakers, you know? I think that he's trying to paint stylistic choices as bad game design. I don't necessarily think that one implies the other, you know? I agree about the linearity. Again, I totally do. And the secrets, they felt a little bit more exposed. I loved the feeling of going through Ratchets 1 and 2 and having, especially Ratchet 1. Ratchet 1 did this amazingly, having to dig for secrets. Ratchet 2, you know, it wasn't as, it was still pretty, like, it wasn't as well hidden. It was a little bit more obvious. 3, it was the most obvious where all the secrets were. But Ratchet 1, ooh, when you found those gold bolts, you felt like you accomplished something. You were like, holy fuck, dude. Like, it took me so fucking long to find the bolt on Novalis that was, like, tucked away behind a fake wall. That is so clever. It's like, you could see it if you were looking for it. And when you finally realize it's there, you're like, oh my god, it's so obvious. But, I don't know, you know, that's kind of, they shifted directions throughout the series. So that is the choices that they made. And if you didn't like that, you know, that's your own opinion. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, it's just a different thing.
Which is a huge plunge into this completely new brand of satire for the series. Now the game is making allusions to real-world cultural memes.
You squishies can't dance.
It's great news for my re-election campaign because, as you know, I'm half robot myself.
All framed around the villain, Dr. Nefarious, having this huge, massive prejudice against a group of people in this world that he never fully explains.
As for you filthy organic life form.
Did he just say that they don't explain Nefarious's backstory? Like, what the fuck?
You can look forward to being disintegrated!
The way they tie into the previous stuff is super weak. Like, Nefarious is actually a big fan of Clank's films and thinks they're real?
I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Secret Agent Clank is merely a fictional character I play on the horror video.
so he wants the character he loves to join in his conquest.
Organic life forms have as much right to inhabit this galaxy as we do.
But when Clank doesn't, he gives up on that and basically drops the whole thing and just makes a replica of him. The problem with this is that up until now, there has never...
Wait, what? What? You can't... He's just writing off major plot points. Like... like, what? This was like a huge part of the plot. The fucking every single vid comic which you are required to play to beat the game in the first place explain the entirety of Nefarious's backstory, why he hates Quark, and why he's such a fucking, like, megalomaniacal fucking asshole. Like, what? And then saying that, like, oh, well, you know, you just make a replica of him, and then, like, that's it. That's not at all what happened. He fucking kidnaps Clank, and then sends a replica so nobody knows. It's just like, what the fuck? He said they don't explain his motivation, not the backstory. They totally, like, how is it not obvious what his motivation is? He's an evil genius who loses his humanity and becomes a robot. Of course he would want to remove everybody else's humanity. He's a fucking... He's... How is it not obvious? The motivation's not terrible. It's right there. Clunk literally did nothing for the story. I mean, he didn't do anything for the story, and I totally agree with that. But it's like, I don't know, the intentions there, I get that it wasn't fleshed out. I don't know. Brit meant the racism? I mean, yes, it would have been better if they had explained some sort of underlying tension between robots and Tyrannoids from the get-go, especially because the Rangers are working for the Galactic, you know, the Galactic Rangers are working with Sasha and the Mayor and all those other people to try to fight the Tyrannoids in the first place. I do agree, it was a very ambitious plot, and they really didn't flesh out a whole, like, as much of it as people would have wanted. But I think just generalizing, saying that Clunk did nothing for the plot, you know, he wants to kill all squishies for no reason, I think that's reducing plot points to the point of them not having any meaning anymore. Which, like, you can do for pretty much any game if you take a step back and be enough of a reductionist, you know? It makes no sense why Nefarious is a robot supremacist. I mean, he's a robot. Like, I don't know. I feel like you have to... As a kid, a lot of this stuff can definitely go over your head, especially with the pop culture references, the political stuff going on. I don't know. Personally, I think it's pretty obvious. Like, he just harbors a lot of hatred for the one person who turned him into a robot in the first place. So why wouldn't he want to take everyone else and turn them into robots too, you know? Clank actually refused Nefarious's orders to show the Doctor he thought everyone had his place in the universe as big as it is. Yeah, I don't know. It's like saying that he just replaced Clank just because is missing the point. He replaced Clank to throw people off his trail and make them think that Clank, like, nothing bad had happened to Clank. I don't know, like, I don't know, I think this plot point is pretty straightforward. If he hates being a robot, why is he a robot supremacist? I don't think he hates being a robot. I think he's just trying to cling to the one thing he has left. And if he has to experience this pain, as a megalomaniacal genius who is also an asshole, his rationale is, well, if I have to be like this, everybody else has to be like this too. To me, it makes sense. Yeah, and Clunk gave... Yeah, he was feeding info to Dr. Nefarious. I don't think that it's wrong to say that a lot of this is, like, a little too convoluted. But to say that they weren't doing anything with the plot at all, I think is just very misleading. He never says to hate being a robot. Actually, yeah, I'm not saying that he does. I'm inferring. Which is, like, not, you know, it's not always strong to leave inferences up to the audience. I think it's kind of bullshit when movies do that, and so I think we should hold games to the same standard. But I also don't think it's that far of a stretch to really say, like, okay, well, a human killed him and he became a robot, so it kind of, like, I don't think there's that big of a gap between he became a robot, he wants to turn everyone else to a robot.
There really seemed to be any clear division between organic life forms and robots in the Ratchet and Clank universe. So Nefarious's motivation just seems random. He even used to be an organic life form himself, which I don't know if that was supposed to be ironic, but it just makes it all the more nonsensical. I mean, I guess if you squinted really hard, you could have inferred some robot discrimination in past titles.
The entire population of that planet will be devoured.
Unless we get there in time.
Hey guys, yeah, I'm here to save you all. Your hero has arrived. But they don't really seem to be any less brutalized than the organic cast. I don't think I can give them enough credit to think they wanted us to hone in on the previous times in the series robots get messed with, and expect us to infer there was some kind of discrimination going on.
Darligratch, Channel 2 News.
Did you see that?
Yes, I hope that poor woman is all right.
She's fine.
Overall, the film's
I love that part. Yeah, I don't know, dude. I mean, like, again, I'm saying was it a little bit too ambitious of a plot point to try? I think so. Why the original was unfair than a new reboot and everything he says is true. I'm like, I don't deny that the original was like a million times better than Rack PS4. I think in every way, shape, and form, the original Ratchet was better. I mean, I would 100% agree with that. But yeah, yo, thanks for the good luck, Smoke.
tie together, but it's not like they couldn't have with a little effort. How about the film industry is exploiting robots, or Quark mistreats the robot army he commands, to tie into Nefarious's goals? Instead they do...
Yeah, that would have... I do agree with that. That would have been a lot stronger. That would have been a lot stronger if they had done that. They would have really driven home, like, alright, it's not just a Dr. Nefarious thing, this has been a common theme, which would help immersion a lot more. I don't deny that. You know, that's the problem when you make a game in a year. So it's one of those unfortunate pitfalls, but I also don't think that really takes away too much from the experience personally. I mean, at the end of the day, this was also a game catered towards kids. So let me finish the video first, Nano, and then I'll VC with you guys.
Like the exact opposite. Seems like everybody loves robots and Ratchet is the one being shat on by the movie producers. And I'm not even going to consider the idea that they want us to think Nefarious got the idea to subjugate organics from his favorite TV show, because he very much considers robots to be the oppressed group.
You choose to bow and scrape before the squishes!
Like with a lot of stuff in the game, Clank's film career is humorous but tenuously relevant. Ratchet 2 had some subplots, but it all ended up tying into the end of the game. Clank's movie stuff is just sorta there. Nefarious brings up the fact that robots are subjugated, but there never seems to be a point where they shove in his face the fact that they're not and he's just self-interested. But neither does anybody ever point out that maybe they are subjugated and he perhaps has a point, and I can understand why they might not have wanted to do the latter. Because casting a character who has genuine grievances with the mistreatment of his race as a villain called Dr. Nefarious in an ostensibly goofy action platformer might have been a bit awkward. And required...
Yeah, that's again, they kind of try to bite off more than they can chew with the actual socio-political aspect of the game itself. Which, you know, again, they tried something, it didn't really work out as well as I think we all would have hoped. But I don't necessarily think it's the worst thing in the world that this plot point is, like, kind of hollow, because it would definitely have gone over pretty much every kid's head. I don't know, simplifying it, I think, helped a lot. But again, looking back on it, like, again, it's one of those things where I agree with what he's saying up to a point, and then I'm like, you know, then I kind of jump ship a little bit here. Yo, what's up, Spratty?
Some effort to make click into place, and they clearly didn't have time to do that. They just wanted to make some goofy racial-themed jokes, and much like Clank's film/TV banter, it never coalesces into anything meaningful. And again, I'm not saying the game isn't funny. Regardless of the overall motifs of the story being loose, you'll still be laughing at some good gags here.
I thought we agreed to put that jungle business behind us.
This fucking part.
It was mating season. How could I have known she was your sister?
It's just annoying all the jokes end up in this meaningless potpourri of themes. The villain villain's motivation isn't really backed up by the game, unlike, say, 2's ultimate villain, who had discernible motives for doing what they were doing. In 1, Drek was out for money, a simple goal, but his greed was the result of a bigger problem that society faced. All the consumeristic lampooning the writing did played into his character. Nefarious hating organic life forms doesn't tie into anything because it's an issue the writers don't establish as a problem in the world, and Nefarious himself gives little justification.
Wait. Now that I think about it, why the fuck did Quark do all that shit in 2? Was it just because he was disgraced as a hero? Like, is that it? Is that all of his motivation to try to throw the entire universe into chaotic, like being fucking like devoured by some blue fuzzy shitball? That was it? You want revenge? That's it? Yeah, that's cool. That's a real winner of a plot point. Some real great motivation we got there. And to be a hero. Yeah, I don't know, dude. He needed money to pay legal fees for the first game, oh my god. He created the purpose so he could save the galaxy from them. And it's like, that's fine, but if you're gonna say that is a stronger plot point than Nefarious trying to get revenge for his humanity being ripped away from him by the shittiest hero of all time in a very embarrassing fashion. I don't know. I think the two are basically comparable at that point. Quark and Rec 2 is kind of like Syndrome from The Incredibles. I guess, but like... Syndrome's whole motivation was that like he didn't want anybody to be a superhero anymore, whereas Quark just wanted to be popular and cool again. I don't know. 3's motives are a lot more convoluted than 2's motives. Yes, they are. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. Again, I wish that they had done more with 3, but I think the idea was there for 3, which, I mean, you don't really get brownie points for having a good idea, but, you know. On Rack 1, it's on a surviving purpose, transforming to hatred against others to get money out of planets. 2, Quark wants to act as a hero again. Rack 3 is humiliated, his idealisms of robot transforms into anti-organic hatred. All 3 are legit. I agree. All 3 are very legit. I think if we're going to say Rack 2's plot and motivation and character drives for the villains are valid, I don't see how you could say that Rack 3's aren't. I mean, obviously Rack 1 probably has the best overall, like, the best umbrella, like, easy to understand, everything is fleshed out, the motivation's there, the resolution is there. I think Ratchet 1 had the overall, it got it. It nailed the formula of what you can do with a serious plot and a goofy platformer. No, Siri, I'm not talking to you. Fuck you. God damn it. It just activated Siri on my goddamn phone. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think you can just say that, oh, you know, Rack 2 was fine, and then say Ouya was shit, you know.
For it. The lack of concrete theming trickles down into the gameplay too. Like, there's a new crate in the game called the Inferno crate. You hit it and then Ratchet goes Devil Trigger and is now forced to only use his wrench for a few seconds, can one-hit kill, and is invincible. But what place does that have? First off, gameplay-wise in this shooter game, and thematically in terms of what the game is based around: military conflict, race wars, and film satire? A box that makes you go on fire and lets you one-hit kill. The fact that extravagant weapons you purchase from salesmen in Ratchet and Clank are the core mechanical draw of the series is sort of taken for granted now. But in the first 2 games, using all these tools of destruction was very much justified by what those games were about. They were about the companies and systems that enabled that firearm economy to exist. Ratchet 3 is about a bunch of things, but none of those really relate to having loads of guns, or upping your arsenal, or Inferno Hell armor lying around, or ninjas for that matter. I mentioned the low-
He's really scraping the bottom of the barrel now with these arguments. I don't know. I don't see how you can possibly have an issue with the jackpot and the Inferno crates existing. That's just a new game mechanic they were trying. Like, what the fuck? And then, like, I don't know anybody. I don't know a single person who played Ratchet and Clank and said, "Oh, you know what I love the most about the weapons? How they tie into this underlying theme of like economy and like how it's destroying like everything around us, and like it's like you want to break away from that cycle, but you have to feed into it, right? Because you can't complete the game without the weapons." Like no one fucking says that. Everyone just says, "Oh yeah, dude, this fucking gun was awesome, and this one was really cool, and this when you shot it went pow, and it was like, oh, holy fuck!" Like it was about the guns from the very beginning. Like, don't try to backpedal and be like, "Oh, well, Ratchet 1 and Ratchet 2 weren't about the guns." But Ratchet 3 was like a little bit too much about the guns, you know?
Enemy variety before and the lack of theming with the monsters in each world compared to 1 and 2 outside of a few levels. Something that really sticks out with one of the enemy types that is in abundance, the ninjas. There's no old school like Eastern themed level, yet the arenas and Nefarious's army just have a bunch of ninja robots for some reason. Just here they come, it's the ninjas. It's Ray Park from Phantom Menace. I guess ninjas are kinda goofy looking. I guess this is the start of wacky fun random series, Ratchet and Clank. Maybe if there was a Monsterpedia like in 2, I could have got some info on the weird rampant ninja influx. For
I'm just not even gonna touch that one. That one's, I don't know.
years I've seen Ratchet 3 as a really odd mess of a Ratchet game. It didn't feel as complete as the last two, and while enjoyable, I always had my doubts about the game's development. Then, years later, I hear this being said in episode 8 of Mike Stout and Tony Garcia's in-depth Ratchet and Clank 3 developer commentary.
If I remember correctly, this game was a disaster until 2 weeks before Gold.
I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I think that's a fair thing to say.
I remember going out to lunch with the designers, and all of us just like we're putting like earthquake blankets over each other and trying not to cry. And I think Colin said, "I'm really worried that we will make Insomniac's first failure." And then like 2 weeks later, it was the highest rated game Insomniac's ever made.
There are also some other little...
My boy Mike. You fucking tell him, Mike. Oh, which one was Mike? Was he the first one or the second one? I'm not really sure. Either way, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, they fixed a lot of the shit. I don't know. It's just like, lots of things are disasters until the deadline. Like, who is to say that you have never done a homework assignment that wasn't a disaster until 3 hours before it was due, you know? I know Mike was a tester in one.
Little interesting tidbits in that series, like the questionable enemy diversity.
We wanted to have a little bit more consistency in the enemy design as we went through here.
Especially for the main enemies in the game.
Yeah, I'm not sure whose decision it was, where that edict came from, but that's sort of where we took this. Is that rather than have every enemy in every level be completely different, which was the Ratchet and Clank 1 and 2 approach,
right?
Was that we have a lot more consistency and you see the same enemies over and over and over again. And that was ideally to save a lot on art and animation time so we could spend that time elsewhere,
right,
rather than just having to constantly be doing new enemies and new animations.
Or how about this insight into the creation of the new crates for the game, which were apparently made to win a case of beer?
We told him, "Hey, Ted, we want to do some new crates." And he says, "We've been trying to come up with new crate ideas from the beginning, and I think we've done everything that we can do with crates at this point." And he says, "If you can do it, I will buy you a case of beer." And that was all the motivation I needed to see this through to the bitter, bitter end.
Dude, that's funny! Like, you're trying to tell me you didn't want more diversity in the shit that you could break in this game? Like, I don't know. Like, what do you want me to say? That's funny as fuck!
Okay, I guess I'll let him off on that. This must be a trouble development, and the fact they managed to tie anything together at the end is probably actually pretty impressive. But unfortunately, you couldn't quite pull the wool over the eyes of this 10-year-old. When I think of Ratchet 3, I remember some funny lines and a few good moments, but all of that is clouded by multiplayer maps, bland-looking levels, and a weird mismatched story. I still feel like it beats out what the series would later become. But as for me, I can't quite get on board with the worship for this one. Hey everybody, thanks for watching.
Yeah, so again, I think oops. I do agree with a lot of stuff that he said. I think he missed basically the biggest parts, which is the gameplay was amazing in 3. The weapons were fucking awesome. The upgrading system was so much more polished than it ever was in 1 or 2. And it was just a different style of game. They wanted to try different things, and like he touches on that. And it's like, it's totally fine if you're like, you know, oh, I wanted Ratchet 1, I didn't get Ratchet 1. It's like, fine, I get that. I don't know. I don't have any ill will towards this guy for thinking this. I don't really know anything about GamingBrit's show, but apparently he's pretty popular. I don't know. 1v1 me, bro. No, but for real. If I'm actually gonna like close this out and give my before I hop into a VC with a few people, because I know some people want to talk with me about this. There's a lot of updates that happen between 2 and 3 that really just yes, not all of them are perfect, but a lot of them really pave the way for what these games will become in the future, and Ratchet 2 found the winning formula. Ratchet 1 was an amazing start. Ratchet 2 took all the good stuff from Ratchet 1 and kind of revamped it to make it flow a little bit more. Plot, as far as just furthering a lot of things, they kind of forsaked, the difficulty of finding the collectibles. They definitely, I don't know, they changed up the overall the way the game operated, but then they took the way the game operated in 2 and they made it fucking incredible in 3. 3 plays like a dream. It really does. So I don't know, I have issues with this. I understand a lot of his points. I don't think they're as big as he makes them out to be, but obviously, you have to make these kinds of videos somehow, so he picked a lot of different points that are certainly valid in most people's eyes, but in my personal opinion, as somebody who plays games for the sake of enjoying the experience of playing the game and not necessarily as much being, I don't know, I'm not saying I don't care about the plot, I'm not saying I don't like the immersion, because I do, but the most important thing to me has always been how the game has played, and that's why I will always love 3, because 3 has so many cool little things. It has the Starship Phoenix. The Starship Phoenix conceptually is so interesting. It's the first time you've ever had a hub, a central hub where the entire game is referenced around, where you can be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go back to home. This is home for me. You can't go back to Veldin until the very end of the game in Ratchet 1. There is no Veldin in Ratchet 2, so there is no sense of home or place where you can chill and just enjoy the game itself. The characters, I think there are less unique characters, but I think that the ones that they kept around got a lot more development. I think they got a lot more screen time. The color palette was less than desirable. The OST was good, although not as good as Ratchet 2 in my opinion. Anything else? The weapons were fucking awesome in 3. You didn't get I don't think you got as many as you did in 1, or in 2 rather, but a lot of the ones that you had in 2 were from 1 anyway, and then when they ported them over from 1, they made them complete dog shit. So the only useful one is the decoy glove, and then the rest of them suck ass. And so the ratio of good weapons, of good weapons to weapons as a whole, I think is better in 3 than it is in 2. Yeah, I think 3 did have the most memorable weapons. They even brought back the fucking lava gun, and they made it the liquid nitrogen gun, which is my favorite gun in the entire fucking trilogy. It's so good. Yeah, Visibomb gun was cool in theory, but it wasn't very useful. At least in my experience. So I'm gonna hop in a VC now. There's some other Ratchet boys who wanted to talk with me about this. So I think I'll do that, since I know there's some people who wanted to do that. So yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna go into this one. The people who wanted to talk with me, I'm gonna be talking with them in this their own Discord server. Yo, Scotto, thank you for the 102, my man. Bruh. Yo, what up? Oh, okay. Well, bye. Yo, Scotto, thank you. Holy shit, dude. For the 102, the 103, the 103, the 103. My man. Yo, what up, Nano?
What's up?
Yo, what?
Just like...
Yeah, dude. Jarnott just popped in and out. I don't know what the fuck he's doing.
Alright. Yeah, I was gonna like... I wanted to like add a couple of points, and then I don't fucking know what we'll do, but about like the weapons and the weapon field, that if you look at like 1 and 2, the weapon field's like decent, but there's like a bunch of really bad duds, and a lot of the weapons will have really annoying quirks to them, like how the chopper in Ratchet 2 has like a shitty like that shitty standing animation and whatnot. And
yeah, oh my god, I fucking hate it. Yeah, it's completely useless. Like it was at least powerful in 1, even though it wasn't like that.
Hey chat.
It wasn't like that amazing, but it was still at least like, you know, you felt like you got your money's worth. But in 2, it was just like, oh, what the fuck is this thing doing? It's awful.
Yeah, it's like a decent idea, but it doesn't fit the game, and like everything else in Ratchet 3 fits, even if some of them are like arguably bad, like the Holo Shield, it's still like a functional weapon that doesn't magnetize to crates when you throw it at a charge, and like stuff like that. Shoutouts to Decoy and Rack 2, because that's like my only problem with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, that's like the big reason Rack 2 is annoying occasionally, because like I know you don't like the stiff momentum, but I'm fine with it. Just the decoy, on Snivelak, when you go for the neutral off the initial starting platform and then do the wrench jump, you can do that initial neutral with the. You can't do it with the decoy because you magnetize to the crates to your right, and you just
Yeah, that's one of my least favorite things as well about like the stiff movement aside, like. At the very least, the charge boot stuff, like when it involves a wrench, is for the most part consistent. Sometimes the wrench locks onto shit too, which is really annoying. But yeah, the decoy just randomly being like, oh yeah, dude, I'm just gonna like fucking launch you 90 degrees to the right. I'm just like, oh my god, kill me. But
I also want to point out, he mentioned the HUD in that. I think we can all agree that the blue looks better. Oh, sorry, the orange looks better than the blue. But the sort of pieces thing that they had in 2 was better than just having numbers.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a more personalized touch. I think that's definitely one of those things.
The original feature. Numbers sort of copping out and being boring.
There's 2 legitimate complaints I can level. Well, actually, there's only one. Oh no, there is 2 legitimate complaints that I can level towards the HUD. Besides, like, oh, it's all subjective and whatnot. Because for the most part, it sort of is. I don't think that the orange one from Ouya meshes well with the game's overall color palette.
I think it meshed quite well in PS2, but on the PS3 version, it looks really bad.
That's because it's really, I don't know, old PS3 remaster is not that good.
Yeah, the Ouya one on PS3, like, it really looks piss yellow. Like, it really just, I don't even know what the fuck they were going for with that color scheme.
Yeah, it looks kind of more matte yellow in the PS2 version, and I like it in the PS2 version.
Yeah.
Not nearly.
But the other thing, the actual like the bad thing about Ratchet 1's one is like,
nothing.
Shut up, Sina. So for anybody who's wondering who's in this call right now, it's obviously me. There's Jarnott, Mr. Jarnott Man, Nano Hollow Guys,
what's up?
And Sina Liddell.
Sinala Bean.
The human
Sinala Bean.
Sinala boy.
Everyone who's subbed to Sina, please spam Sinala Bean. That's like how many people?
2.
1. It's just Ruben.
He's not even Tab anymore.
No, Tab unsub, but Ruben subbed to me. So.
Sometimes.
That's your options.
Yeah. But like Rack 1's HUD is there's like a delay to everything you do, and that's like the only problem with it. Because like it sort of makes sense.
No,
you see when the menu's coming.
I found that delay was 1,000 times worse on 3. Rack 1, there is pretty much no quick select pause. Or quick select delay, rather. On 2
I don't
and
mean
3,
the quick select, I mean like the actual menus.
Let me just interject real quick and say that for people in the chat, or like when I post this to YouTube or whatever, people are wondering, we're going to get a little bit more into like the actual speedrunning tech of it now. Like, these are a little bit more nuanced things that a lot of casual people might not be aware of, but we're really aware of it because we deal with it on a daily basis.
Like GILJs, get out.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
If you don't do GILJs and runs, then just...
If you don't do GILJs casually, just...
Alright, enough of that meme.
It's not
if you
a
don't
meme.
do GILJs in real life, you just...
I feel responsible for this meme, and I think it's gone on a little bit too long. Well,
I think I'm responsible for this meme.
I thought you said you stole it from Sippy.
Huh?
I thought you said you stole this meme from Sippy.
Me? Or Nano?
Or me.
Doesn't matter.
No, I didn't steal it from anyone. I think it just came up with it at some point.
Yeah.
Other thing, he mentions like the visuals of Ratchet 1 versus like 2 and 3, and I'm pretty sure Mike said something on Twitter about this. I need to get to his.
Well, no. What annoys me is that he was basing all the visuals off of playing the PS3 versions. We can all agree that the PS3 remaster, the PS3 remaster of 2, the HD-ness does the best for 2. Does the most work.
Oh my god, yeah, it's night and day. Like, it really is crazy how much different it looks.
Yeah, but one second here. Yeah, so he says it's funny. One big critique of this video, well, besides the, he says it's funny. One big critique of this video is we recycle multiplayer maps as single player levels when we actually do the opposite. Still a reasonable point. That's one thing. But he also said, oh damn, where is it? Oh, yeah, it's one more thing here. So he says, like he also some dude says he also talks about how the game feels duller in Ratchet 1 and 2. Than in Ratchet 1 and 2 in the visual department. And Mike says, I don't think so. He showed a lot of instances with a lot of atmospheric baked lighting, but there was a lot of new visual tricks. And one that I think I pointed out in your chat, Zem, was like places like Command Center have like, you don't see it in the game. And I only noticed because there's an error with PCSX2 how it renders bloom effects, but like the whole atmosphere of Mylon has so much bloom, it's ridiculous. You don't even notice it, and it looks really bad without it.
I kind of
I'll try and link some screenshots.
That'd be cool. I'd be interested to see that.
Like he said,
once you get PCSX2, just go on Direct3D 11 and turn up the resolution because all the bloom effects go like crazy, and you'll see.
Yeah, I noticed that because he said that the levels in 3 look way more drab, and I was just kind of thinking that no, it's entirely subjective. If you compare like Koros to Altanis, of course there's a big difference. Those two are pretty much match for match, but he compared, what was it?
Oh shit,
like, Tyrannosis, which that level should just be renamed to Brown as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah,
you can do the same thing on Rack 1. You can just point at Iridia and say it's dark, it's dreary, and it's boring.
Oh, I like some aspects of Iridia.
Yeah, some are alright, but on the whole, it's.
I think the thing with is that it's a lot cleaner, and I guess consistent, but it's mainly cleaner. There's still a bunch of visual tricks, and generally it's a good looking, and a lot of I think it doesn't look as good. Perhaps is like you look at Metropolis and like Marcadia, and like they're still good looking. Maybe not as good as Rack 1 good looking, but like that's a sacrifice they had to make for the skirmish campaign maps, and they look good. Like on Marcadia less so than Metropolis, but like they still look decent. It's a trade-off that I think I'd be willing to make because it's not like that big of a deal, I suppose.
Plus, there's all the tiny things that they added in 3 that most people won't even notice, even playing casually, like lock strafe mode and things like that.
Shout out to lock strafe, fucking amazing. Yeah.
Quick shout out to Silence.
Yeah, honestly, having the ability to switch between third, first, and lock strafe modes was actually kind of cool.
Sort of dumb.
Yeah, first person mode is like kind of stupid, but like I don't know, you could just swap between them. It added a real sense of being able to play the game how you wanted to play it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If early LDF was actually a thing, which I'm like 99.999% sure it isn't at this point, I would have tasked in lock strafe because it's a lot easier to do like strafe GILJs with lock strafe because like the camera doesn't go around like everywhere, and you sort of you can keep a lot more straight, whereas with strafe GILJs you have to like sort of control where you're turning, otherwise you go wildly off course.
I know early LDF has the same problems as pokey skip at this point.
No,
It's
pokey
pretty
skip's
much
actually-
impossible. No, it's
No,
pretty
no,
much
pokey skip's more
impossible, and then
possible.
someone will find something, and it will become. Everyone will get all hyped for it for about a week.
That's like 4 times more likely actually with pokey skip over LDF, because like I mean, if you can find a way to warp up 200 units, sure, but it's more likely that you're going to find a bunch of decent ways to get Clank around the terrain. Well, in my opinion, at least. I actually want to look into that at some point, but I've got too much on my plate.
Oh, actually, I just remembered one big thing that I didn't talk about, and that I don't know if he really talked about it much either. The GamingBrit, whatever the fuck his name is.
Yeah, the GamingBrit.
He kind of like, I don't know, like did any of you three really enjoy Clank sections?
In Ouya,
I thought they were tolerable. I didn't like them in Ratchet 1, but I didn't really like Ratchet 1 as like on the whole. I thought Ratchet 1 was sort of the Assassin's Creed 1 to Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood sort of deal. Actually, it's a really good comparison. So Assassin's Creed 1 is like a solid 6, maybe 7 out of 10 game, and has really good ideas, but the game feels off. And there's a lot of stuff that really shouldn't be in there because it's not amazing. 2 makes everything better, and then 3 is like 2, but a slightly different twist. So it's a lot less linear and more open with what you do, whether you consider that better or not. And I think that's an apt comparison to like Ratchet 2 and Ouya.
Yeah.
But the other way around. Well, then Assassin's Creed went to shit, so you know, but the Ratchet 2 kept going.
I think that's kind of interesting to me because like I've always been the kind of person who never really understood, like, you know, when your favorite band puts out a new album and they completely change their sound, but like you still love them because you can tell that at the core they're like still the same band. That's kind of like, I never really understood the people who were like, oh well, it's not this album, like one of their like previous like 4 or 5 albums, and it's like, well yeah, if you wanted that album, just listen to that album again. It's like if I can
get where they're coming from. I can definitely get where they're coming from. If you're enamored with a specific band.
That's another point. If they had just pretty much re-released Ratchet 2 with some new levels in it, people would have complained that there wasn't enough innovation. I mean, look at what happened with Crash 3. That was the main criticism, is that they hadn't changed anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, they didn't change much with Crash 2 besides the hub and like not shitty digital controls. So like,
oh yeah, same point.
Well, from what I remember at least, because I had Warped and I played a bit of Crash 2, but I remember a lot of Warped.
My first Crash game, I had Warped, but I never really played that one too much. My first one was The Wrath of Cortex on PS2, where the load times were no less than like 70 seconds between every planet.
What is this, like 2 years ago, PS3, Xbox days?
No, I've only...
Shout out to Bloodborne loading for so long that you'd fuck up your television because of the burn-in.
I've only ever finished one Crash game in my entire life, and that was Crash of the Titans.
Yeah. Actually, well, I'm not sure whether to say Pikachu or Pupka, but like,
I have
said, what I really miss is the sense of accomplishment you got from Rat 1.
But I never finished it.
When you Twin Sanity is a really fun finish.
Yeah, and I talked about what Richu said as well. Sorry, go ahead, Nano.
Sorry, I wanted to just Pikachu was like has a good comment in chat, which I wanted to sort of go on to, which is it's not really it's also a sort of subjective thing depending on what you want from your like game design. He says like what I really miss about this is the sense of accomplishment you got from Rack 1 when you found a secret, but some secrets just took a long time to figure out, like the gold bolt on Orxon. Another one I want to say was the gold bolt in Velden 2 with the Torna.
No.
Yeah, that was so good. That one's a really clever one.
That's a good one, but the problem with a lot of secrets in Ratchet 1 for me is that with the Torna one excluded, because that's really good, is that they're not really communicated well. You look at like the breakable walls and stuff. You're never told you can break walls.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Like, you could be like, yeah, you can do it by accident, or you can be like, oh, it praises experimentation, or like it highlights and gives rewards for experimentation, but like it's like that's subjective, and I don't like it. Personally, I don't like it. I think I could make a reasonable case for it's objectively worse than Ratchet 2 and 3, where at least in general, the secrets were either communicated to you well or based on previous experiences.
Yeah,
I guess.
like for
The top
me,
ones, maybe.
back when I was a child, I was like, I didn't really like understand a lot of the stuff. So like, when I found the one on Iridia where you break the wall, I just ended up like throwing bombs at any suspicious looking wall
Yeah.
for the entire game. I was like,
Yeah, it's a bit like that.
yeah.
At least like I don't know. Another really good one is like the gold bolt on what's the planet with the thunderstorm? Is it Altanus?
Yeah.
Altanus, yeah.
One, yeah, the gold bolt one there with the swing shot course.
That
It's
was
like,
hard.
well, of course,
That was
but
really
yeah.
hard as a kid.
It's hard, but like,
Yeah, that one's a fun one. Also,
I think it's a good one.
the one on what is it? Oh, the one on Kalibo 3 where you have to get it on the grind rail. And it's
that took me
Oh yeah, that was fun.
That grind rail was so long.
Yeah, that was a tough
so
grind
hard
rail.
to figure out where you had to jump off. I also want to give a shout out to the one on Iridia that's underneath the Trespasser. Because
Yeah, that one was so clever.
The second you enter that room and there's the cutscene, so you can't even get a glimpse of it as you're walking in, and then it changes your perspective.
They pulled a lot of that like underneath where you currently are stuff like they did in Florana and like a bunch of other places. Yeah, I still like it.
My personal two favorites will always be the two on Altanus that are within 50 feet of each other.
Yeah.
You would never expect that. You're just like, oh, well, I see one over there, and it's like I must have gotten the secret, and then you're like, wait, I only got like, what the fuck?
Oh, also, speaking of those, right now I want to find a way to do that without going over the wall, because I hate how slow the climbing is.
PDA side flips.
You don't have the PDA at that point.
Go get it, go back.
I don't know if we can rule out getting the PDA though, guys. Like
PDA less PDA side flips. Come on.
Yeah, no. Technically, if you could find a way to memory manip, you can actually enable the goodies menu from memory. Because it's not like it's not tied to your save. Well, I guess it is, but like you can enable it straight from memory by changing like one address.
And thus PS2 Rack 1 becomes even more unrunnable.
Thus, it becomes arbitrary code execution.
That'd be sick.
Yeah, if
but I
you
have
can
no
memory
idea how it-
manip, why don't you just memory manip all of your gold bolts in?
Actually, the only way I can think we can memory manip would be either abusing the PS3's save shit, like the save system and how fucking horrible it is, or if we could somehow, you remember, I think Mike said it before at some point where the craziest thing they did was patch Ouya's multiplayer by abusing a memory leak in the terms in the end user license agreement. And,
Wait, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's how they patched it.
They patched it by abusing a memory leak and patching the memory leak at the same time.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Coding is fucking amazing.
Yeah, because it was like.
Let me find it. Yeah, here we go. No, actually, that isn't it. Memory leak. Nope. ULA. All right, here we are. Yeah. So I found it. Let me scroll. There we go. Yeah. So it was Aqualex and Mike were talking about a bunch of shit. And where is it? Oh yeah. He said Aqualex is like, one of you guys exploited an online patch for EU at some point. Mike says sort of. They overflowed the end user license agreement patch in a patching system from the server side. Basically made the game patchable without needing to ship you discs. It was the craziest thing. That's why the PS3 version doesn't have the patch. They couldn't figure out how it was done. Idle minds, ladies and gentlemen.
Also, there was one of the episodes of the developer podcast. They were talking about the first-person wall climb glitch in Ratchet 2, and they
The
were
League
told,
of Climbers.
Yeah, and they were told that they have to patch it, and so many devs wanted to keep it in. It was like an Easter egg. There was apparently an hour-and-a-half meeting of if they could keep it in and just not tell Sony and tell them
Because on the Insomniac forums, there was a bunch of dudes called the League of Climbers who would just try and go out of bounds and see what was that's the thing. They mentioned it in the developer thing.
Yeah.
That struck me as amazing. Oh, I just want to say, Sylvester said in chat, your code is hacky as fuck. actually it isn't. It's like
no, it is.
I've said no, it isn't. It isn't. It isn't. You're wrong, John.
It just is.
I've said this. If it's hacky, it does not appear hacky at all. Like I've said this in Zem's chat before, but like Ratchet 2 is a soft mod of Ratchet 1. We have screenshots and proof that the old Ratchet 1 menus are still in Ratchet 2.
Maybe they
Even
just
if it's
weren't going to change the HUD and just forgot to remove it.
Ratchet 2 is like a bad fan game that stole the assets from Ratchet 1. It's not even like a soft mod.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sort of. But the thing is, Ratchet 2 is buggy as fuck. I've never had
that back in.
Yeah. I think it was Foas and some of the other dev dudes manipped like the menus around in the beta and stuff.
Yeah.
Can we just,
I'm not sure if they were removed in the final game.
Memory manip a wrong warp to credits or something?
Yes, we could. There's wait, I think
It won't be Jankbot, it'll be
I think just a video game tester or whatever it's called has a fake like cheat percent run, which is just the quickest way to warp to credits or something. What was the other thing? Oh yeah, but I've never had Ouya crash on me. And like it's fucking unbreakable. Wait, where? What? Well, besides the remaster.
I've had it crash on me.
Yeah, there's a couple crash points.
You said Aquados before, right?
Crashed. No, I've crashed going into the Courtney Cup scene a couple of times.
Oh wait, no, never mind. It wasn't Aquados. That was when your disc was scratched. I remember that.
Yeah, that was. I forget when it happened during my Hondo trifecta. I did have one crash in Ouya then.
I had like 6 in Rack 2.
I had
Crash Central.
Dude. I could
game die.
Yeah, I could name at least half a dozen crashes off the top of my head. The one crash that I always tell people to avoid when they're doing Ouya Hundo runs is that if you're doing Veldin on NG+, if you go through Veldin the normal way, which you have to for a Hundo run, or else you won't get the Friend of the Rangers trophy, when you get to the very end with that warship at the end, if you hit that warship with a fully charged V5 shot cannon shot, it will crash the game every single time.
So are we going to do
why that
crash
would be
percent speedruns now?
Crash percent speedruns, that'd be cool.
Because there's one video on YouTube and I can't find it for the life of me of some guy doing an Insomniac Museum speedrun in Rack 3. I don't know if that, and it's just going to
the trouble
and
is
it's just going into the.
Oh, let me download the NG minus save.
NG minus, wait, what?
Yeah, what should I call it? Shoot made a save.
Does anybody know when it crashed
that has
in my
like
Ouya Hundo
it's
run?
all the NG plus enemies, but with the first playthrough weapons and everything. So like all the enemies are scaled up.
Do you get the bolt multiplier though?
No.
Oh, that's good. We should make it. When we make the alt meat extension categories board, whenever we fucking do that, we should add that as a category.
And then I want it to have negative bolts, and Shoop is looking into it. So.
I don't think. Maybe that's possible. I think the bolts are signed.
Yeah.
How many bolts can you go up to? It's like 9, 9,
There's a
9,
max,
9, 9, 9, 9,
Oh wait, no, it does go negative, but you can't
Yeah.
get it to. You can't get it to decrement to
I was
minus
gonna
0.
say, so you should be able to go to minus 999999999. With the
Yeah.
way that the
Oh, wait, no, I
PS2
don't think it's
handles
999, but it's
From
not
shoot
999.
file.
It's a maximum. It's the maximum of whatever integer for whatever amount of storage space in memory they're using. I can't remember. Probably like 4 bytes or something.
Random.
More than 4 bytes.
Thank you.
No, 4 bytes is pretty standard for an integer.
Yo,
no, but
thank you, Fabulous, for
the
4 months in a row.
PS2
Dude. Really appreciate that. Welcome back to the Rag Pack, dude.
It is. Let me
So it
actually.
might
I've got
have-
the cheat. I've got the cheat table. I'll check.
So it might be 8 bytes.
No. A lot of addresses in Ouya are 4 bytes. Or a lot of addresses for Ratchet are 4 bytes. Ouya. Let's just load up this one. Yeah, bolts are 4 bytes.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. I can't remember if they're signed or not. I think they are.
Richie says they used int 32.
In 32, maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, reminder that I'm sort of like in over my head on a lot of the dev stuff. Because I sort of know what I'm talking about.
I don't know, I've just been trying to like memorize a lot of Unicode recently.
Yeah, Nano, you gotta get that game knowledge.
So
The game knowledge. Oh, here we go. Slander. No. That's fine.
Oh, it is on.
Oh yeah, it is 4 bytes. It's just 32-bit integers.
Okay.
Yeah. I sort of still don't know what I'm talking. Yeah, I'm a test dude.
Fuck.
I know all about the physics of the game, which I could rant about for ages, and how it's so good as a speed game. But
dude, doesn't it just? It's just fucking sick. Like honestly.
It's the reason why I think it's better than like Jak and a lot of other games like well, I guess Mario has a lot of momentum stuff because in 64 you have what are they called, backwards long jumps or whatever it is, BLJs, yeah. But like it's funny because the movement system's so good in Ratchet games that I can't actually tell what's glitched or not at all. It just works, well, besides clipping, because like I can't tell if I should classify GILJs as a glitch, because technically it's just really fast inputs and abusing the way the system is coded to work.
I mean, like
jumps
are
the way you want it.
in the Ratchet series.
Yeah.
Because like from the time you're grounded, that's like not supposed to happen.
Yeah, I think the line is pretty blurred for a lot of the movement tech between like yeah, a lot of it is just abuse of like, I don't know if I would even call them poorly designed game mechanics, because they're cool. It's just like there's some loose ends that we just abuse.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, like, well, what do you mean loose ends? And like, because
more so just like, I don't think they intended for us to be able to like build momentum in Ratchet 1 as efficiently as we do, but we can.
Oh, of course not.
You know, like that's more what I mean. Like loose end, like I don't have coding knowledge. That's like the layman's way of me putting that.
Yeah, they're gonna come on in another developer podcast and tell us that like GILJs are intended.
I wish that'd be
stuff. It's a GILJs are intended. ILJs
it's the
are
optimal
not
way
intended.
to play the game, and then I will be vindicated, and I will win life.
And they're gonna tell us that there's like some really easy way to do it, or something. Like you just hold R1 down for 5 seconds, and you're standing still, and you'll instantly just start GILJ everywhere.
Yeah. Actually, the funny thing is that about GILJs is that I've come to the conclusion that it's almost unless you need to accelerate really. Unless you're traveling in a straight line, it's almost always worth it to just GILJ instead of charge boot, because GILJs in a task setting, they're so much more maneuverable. You can just do like 90-degree jumps from like you can like you won't see it until my full runner thing comes out, which I might fucking show in like because I gotta get that task guide done. I might just use it as an example or something. But like after the first long jump in the path of death, and you move up that slope and you side flip up, and normally you just do 2 side flips and then keep going. For the tasks, you GILJ up, side flip, and then ground ILJ and turn like 90 degrees right and land on the platform where the titanium bolt's supposed to be.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like shit's ridiculously maneuverable.
Yeah.
That thing is metal as fuck.
That's like, and even in the RTA. Yeah, I watched it. Yeah, it was really fucking cool.
Because you were telling the first story.
Yeah. Even in an RTA sense, people really underestimate how much you can do with long jumps. Like I remember there was the first time I ever saw it was actually in Ratchet 1, where Nuka would turn like 15 degrees when doing neutral long jumps and still keep all of his speed. I was like, that's fucking sick. And then it's like you can do the exact same thing in Ouya. So I can only imagine how ridiculous it can be from a task perspective. Just like, it's 80 degrees, here we go.
Yeah, you don't see it in the Velden one because there's nothing there. I guess if I was to redo maybe Battalia, there'd probably be a lot more sudden like 90-degree. You can actually like if you add in strafe. If it was Ratchet 2 or Ratchet 3, if you add in strafing, like the shit's crazy what you can do. You just whoops, I'm long jumping backwards now across like the whole level. Well, wait, I need to test if you can do that, but I'm pretty sure you could do that. I want to test that.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, you can long jump backwards.
The entire game.
But like chain them.
PCSX2 locking
yeah, I don't know if you could change. I'm sure you
that
too.
Which honestly, like I just thought of this when enough people get like really good at tasking stuff, We should have not a speed competition, but a swag competition.
Oh,
Yeah.
Let me tell you how to win the swag competition, right?
Watch me just pull out all my unlisted strats here.
What you want to do, right, is you want to ground ILJ and chain long jumps backwards in a circle and then put Yaku stack. Actually, I might need to make a video of that.
Or even better, what you should be able to do is do like GILJs and a combination of GILJs, long jumps, and PDA glides, so that you can complete an entire level doing the intended path but not touching the ground once.
You have to touch the ground to GILJ. Oh well.
No, you wouldn't. You'd do like some crazy GILJ on the walls or something.
Jarnott, are you okay?
Well, technically you can sort of do that because slope
Oh,
intercepts.
well, great then.
It depends. It depends. Slope intercepts are really easy in Ratchet 1. So like the rocked wall on the right of your ship on Core 2, you can like chain side flips, like basically Sina flip and like long jump up that to a certain extent. Which I was testing when doing Core 2 because I was like, oh, what's the quickest way to get up to the main room? But like, no, it's still ground up J'ing up the goddamn chute.
Not ground Sina flipping up the chute.
I know, right? That's amazing.
Ground Sina flipping's useless. Well, unless you got momentum already.
Wait, is that a thing?
Well, yeah. Well, I say Sina flipping, but basically, as long as there's ground underneath you, you could still cancel a side flip into another one. So, assuming like any elevator that moves up quick enough, you could just change side flips.
Oh, well. Oh, actually, I found something yesterday with ground ILJs.
Oh boy, here we go.
So it turns out, if you ground ILJ in a circle for 30 straight minutes, while only listening to All Star by Smash Mouth, you can actually summon Armin.
Okay, anyway. Moving on. No, I don't have anything to say. I had to divert that before it got too out of hand.
I can just imagine a swag competition as Nano and Sina go full tinfoil hat mode.
And then the winner of the swag competition is Skrit, who submits a video of him eating the pancakes that he made that one time. Or was it an omelet? I forget what it was. It was like fucking scrambled eggs with like a whole bunch of inedible shit in it. And he ate it on the stream and then threw up.
I don't remember.
Probably my favorite stream from Skrit.
It was